The human brain is a remarkably intricate organ, and studying brain anatomy reveals just how complex and fascinating it truly is. It is not a random collection of tissues, but rather a highly structured system in which every region contributes in a precise manner to movement, perception, thought, and behavior. Throughout this overview, I will not only describe the anatomy and physiology, but also highlight some clinical examples that reveal the consequences of dysfunctional brain areas. Without further ado, let's begin. The cerebrum, the most expansive part of the brain, is divided into two hemispheres, and further into four lobes: frontal, parietal, temporal, and occipital. Each lobe is marked by distinct grooves, also known as sulci, which separate them and help define their boundaries. The frontal lobe sits at the very front. Along its back edge lies the precentral gyrus, which houses the primary motor cortex. This cortex is laid out in a somatotopic map, the motor homunculus, a representation where different body parts are mapped across the brain surface. In simpler terms, one strip of cortex controls the hand, another the lips, another the foot, so on. Above and in front of this motor strip, the frontal lobe contains three major gyri: the superior, middle, and inferior frontal gyri, separated by the superior and inferior frontal sulci. This region is known as the prefrontal cortex, and it is the seat of higher executive functions: planning, judgment, impulse control, and personality. In the dominant hemisphere, the inferior frontal gyrus contains Broca's area, essential for speech production. When injured, speech becomes slow and effortful, though comprehension remains largely intact, a syndrome known as Broca's aphasia. For study purposes, remember, the frontal lobe is about both motion and management. Just behind the central sulcus lies the parietal lobe. This region contains the postcentral gyrus, home of the primary somatosensory cortex, which receives input about touch, vibration, pain, and proprioception from the opposite side of the body. If injured, sensation is lost. But more subtle syndromes highlight its role in awareness of space. In hemispatial neglect, caused by damage to the non-dominant parietal lobe, a person may ignore the entire opposite half of their environment. They might eat only from one side of the plate, dress only one half of the body, or shave just one side of the face, not from carelessness, but because the brain no longer recognizes that neglected space. To remember what this area does, think of the parietal lobe as position and perception. It tells you where you are and how you relate to your surroundings. Inferior to the lateral sulcus lies the temporal lobe, a hub of auditory, linguistic, and emotional processing. It is organized into the superior, middle, and inferior temporal gyri, separated by the superior and inferior temporal sulci. Deeper inside lies Wernicke's area, located in the dominant hemisphere, crucial for language comprehension. If damaged, speech may remain fluent and grammatically correct, yet devoid of meaning. An individual with Wernicke's aphasia may speak in flowing sentences that sound convincing but carry no sense, and often remain unaware of the deficit. The temporal lobe also contains the hippocampus, critical for forming new memories, and the amygdala, which colors those memories with emotional significance. This is why moments of fear or joy are recalled far more vividly than neutral events. In temporal lobe epilepsy, abnormal discharges may produce déjà vu, rising fear, or strange odors that exist only in perception, proof of how intimately this lobe links memory, perception, and emotion. At the posterior pole of the brain lies the occipital lobe, devoted primarily to vision. The primary visual cortex receives input from the lateral geniculate nucleus of the thalamus. An especially intriguing example is the Anton syndrome, in which individuals are cortically blind, yet weirdly enough they deny their blindness. They may bump into furniture and yet insist they can see perfectly, fabricating details about their surroundings. This paradox underscores how visual awareness requires not only sensation, but cortical recognition. Beneath the cortex lie the subcortical structures. The thalamus, a paired egg-shaped structure located deep within the diencephalon, functions as the brain's central relay station. Virtually all sensory pathways, except for olfaction, pass through the thalamus before reaching the cerebral cortex. Its specialized nuclei distribute information with remarkable precision. The lateral geniculate nucleus relays visual input, the medial geniculate nucleus handles auditory signals, and the ventral posterior nucleus processes somatosensory information from the body and face. Damage results in thalamic pain syndrome, Dejerine-Roussy syndrome, characterized by paradoxical hypersensitivity, where even light touch or mild temperature changes are perceived as intensely painful. This highlights the thalamus as not only a passive relay, but an active regulator of sensory perception and consciousness. Just below the thalamus lies the hypothalamus, a small but powerful controller of homeostasis. It regulates hunger, thirst, body temperature, circadian rhythm, and autonomic activity, while exerting endocrine influence through the pituitary gland. Lesions may lead to obesity, temperature instability, or endocrine imbalance. Attached to the base of the hypothalamus is the pituitary gland, often called the mastermind gland of the body. It is divided into an anterior and posterior lobe, each releasing hormones that regulate growth, reproduction, metabolism, and stress responses. The anterior pituitary secretes hormones such as growth hormone, thyroid-stimulating hormone, and adrenocorticotropic hormone, while the posterior pituitary releases oxytocin and vasopressin. Although small in size, the pituitary gland exerts control over many other endocrine glands, making it a key link between the brain and the body's hormonal systems. Think of the basal ganglia as the brain's movement moderators. They are a group of nuclei which include the caudate, putamen, globus pallidus, subthalamic nucleus, and substantia nigra. Now, they don't start movement, that's the cortex's job, but they make our actions smooth and precise while suppressing unwanted movements. When things go wrong here, the effects are dramatic. Take Parkinson's disease, for example. Loss of dopamine neurons in the substantia nigra leads to that classic triad: slow movements, resting tremor, and rigidity. So, you see, even though these structures are small, their impact on movement is huge. Next, the limbic system. This network is all about emotions, motivation, memory, and behavior. Key players include the amygdala, hippocampus, hypothalamus, thalamus, and even parts of the basal ganglia. They are the reason why we remember emotionally charged events so vividly. Our limbic system makes sure certain experiences stick. Now, let's move down to the brainstem. It's the connection between the brain and spinal cord, and it keeps us alive by controlling essential functions. It has three main parts: midbrain, pons, and medulla. The midbrain is where visual and auditory reflexes are coordinated through the superior and inferior colliculi. It also houses dopaminergic centers, such as the substantia nigra and ventral tegmental area, which are essential for movement and reward. Just below the midbrain lies the pons, which acts as a bridge connecting the cerebrum with the cerebellum. The pons also contains cranial nerve nuclei, specifically 5 through 8. Severe damage to this region can lead to locked-in syndrome, where a person is fully awake and aware, but unable to move anything except their eyes, demonstrating just how critical the pons is for communication between brain regions. Finally, we have the medulla oblongata. Medulla is connecting directly to the spinal cord, and it serves as the control center for breathing, heart rate, and blood pressure. Lesions here are often fatal. The cerebellum, tucked beneath the occipital lobes, calibrates movement and balance. It does not initiate action, but refines it by comparing intended motion with actual performance. Unlike motor cortex lesions, which cause weakness, cerebellar damage causes incoordination. Movements are present, but clumsy. Imagine someone trying to touch their nose but overshooting repeatedly, or attempting to walk in a straight line but veering unpredictably. This illustrates the cerebellum's essential role in motor precision. Last, but not least, we will talk about the protective structures in the ventricular system. The brain is enclosed within the skull, which forms a rigid barrier safeguarding it from external forces. Within this bony case lie 3 concentric coverings, collectively known as the meninges. The outer dura mater is thick and supportive, providing structural stability. Beneath it, the arachnoid mater forms a delicate layer that is separated from the innermost pia mater by the subarachnoid space, through which cerebrospinal fluid circulates. The pia mater itself is extremely thin and follows the contours of the brain's surface, investing even its smallest folds in grooves. The ventricular system forms a series of interconnected cavities within the brain. At the center are the 2 lateral ventricles, one in each hemisphere, which curve through the frontal, temporal, and occipital lobes. These communicate through the interventricular foramina with the 3rd ventricle, a narrow midline cavity lying between the thalami. From there, the cerebral aqueduct passes through the midbrain to reach the 4th ventricle, which lies between the pons and cerebellum. The 4th ventricle, in turn, opens into the subarachnoid space, allowing cerebrospinal fluid to circulate around the brain and spinal cord. In the end, the brain is not just a map of structures. It is a living network where anatomy, physiology, and pathology intersect. Understanding this organization is essential for medicine, because every clinical deficit tells the story of the structure behind it. And that wraps up our overview of brain anatomy. If you found this information helpful, please give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments what other topics you'd like me to cover next. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.